Hello and thank you for joining us at Tent Weavers. I'm Rabbi Michael Gilboa. I'm here with my co-host Rabbi Juan Mejia, and we are going to take a look at a very interesting text today and what it has to say about conversion to Judaism. This is something that I encountered, a few years ago. I think, Juan, you introduced this to me.
Yes, I think I brought this up in one of my parasha videos.
Yes, yeah.
And it was this great, I never studied these texts, and it's one of these hidden gems.
Right. So this is from the Talmud. It's from Mejia Nedarim, and the background of this conversation is the rabbis are sort of riffing on Genesis 14 and 15. In Genesis 14, Abraham is involved in this big war between 9 kings. His nephew is taken captive. It seems like the whole city of Sodom is taken captive, and Abraham goes and rescues his nephew and the whole people, and he has this interaction with the kings afterwards. And then in Genesis 15, we have what's called the covenant between the pieces, where God makes this covenant with Abraham. And in the midst of the covenant, God says, your children, your descendants will be slaves in Egypt. And the rabbis, they're riffing on this. They're asking the question, what did Abraham do? Right. Why? What did Abraham do to deserve this? What could he have done? Really, let's look in the last couple of chapters. Is there anything in chapter 14 that he did wrong? Is there anything in chapter 15 that he did wrong? So that's the background here.
Which is really good, juicy midrash. I think a lot of people that start learning midrash, particularly if they're reading it critically, some midrashim can be not that the midrashim that try to make everyone perfect. Right, like that Abraham, he knew everything, and King David, of course, would never do this to Uriah the Hittite because he's a righteous, holy man. I don't like those midrashim as much because they take a lot of the humanity out of the Tanakh, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about our scripture is that it's not the Iliad, and it's not Homer, and it's not these perfect, absolute these guys fail, and these guys fail bad sometimes. The midrashim that try to smooth the angles of the patriarchs and the biblical figures are not as inspiring to me as this, which is very critical. And they're definitely not the majority. They're hidden. And the fact that this was a discovery for me, and it's not a midrash that is quoted as often as others that might be a little bit more toxic, is maybe it's a warning sign of where we need to apply correction, of just saying, look, we have different voices in the tradition that have different ideas about many things, about the righteousness of patriarchs, or in this case, conversion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this one actually goes the other direction, which is so cool. You could imagine, okay, so we have to spend some time in Egypt. We're going to be slaves in Egypt, then we're going to come out. And that's just part of the plan. That's just part of God's plan. That's how it has to be. That's how it's definitely always been, for preordained, so to speak. And this midrash is saying, no, there's a specific reason why we were sent down to Egypt to be slaves. It didn't have to be that way, but it's sort of a consequence of what flows out of this earlier iteration, and it is a consequence of Abraham's choices here. So all right, so let's delve into the text. So Rabbi Abahu said that Rabbi Elazar said, "Why was Abraham our father punished and his children enslaved for 210 years?" It's an interesting number. We could talk about that another time. One answer, because he pressed his Torah students into forced service. As it says, he mustered his retainers, born into his house. So this is when he goes to rescue Lot. He gets all of his men, and they make sort of an ad hoc army. And Rabbi Elazar is saying he took his Torah students away from Torah study to serve in the army. No politics, but yeah. Anyway.
I'm sure that midrash can be quoted in a different context by different people, not us. We will not be focusing on this midrash.
Perhaps, yes. All right, so it goes on. Shmuel said, because he examined the characteristics of the Holy Blessed One, as it says, how will I know that I am to possess it? So what did he do to deserve going down to Egypt? He questioned God. He said, God, how can you prove to me that I am going, that my descendants rather will possess the land of Canaan? Shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have questioned God.
And
Okay,
it's almost
that's
like a logical argument. Like you don't think, which in a way, I'm always puzzled by this story of the 4 and the 5 kings, because when you know when the kings are coming from, if you set it in context, it's the king of Shinar. This is the king of Babylonia. This is an empire, and this is a Bedouin, like this like Semitic nomad with his farm help. And his best man Elazar, and they are able to defeat what would be an imperial army, kind of like
right.
on their own. So Abraham's doubts, there would be like very like, yeah, you just defeated Babylonia, like you can't take over a bunch of other shepherds, because
Right,
there was
right.
no settled empire in the land of Israel, as at least the Bible does not acknowledge that there is an imperial presence.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Oh, it's an interesting moment there. I don't know that I'm in love with this idea that you can't ask God for things. You can't ask God for proof of something. Maybe not. Maybe that wasn't the right time. Maybe that wasn't the best moment to do it. Regardless. So the text goes on. This is the one we really want to get to, is Rabbi Yochanan, his answer for why, what did Abraham do that caused his descendants to have to go down to Egypt into slavery? Rabbi Yochanan said, because he kept people from coming under the wings of the divine presence. As it says, give me the people and take the goods for yourself. So this is an interesting quote. This is also from Genesis 14. This is at the end of the war, when Abraham has defeated the armies that had swept through the land, and presumably they had taken a bunch of stuff. They had taken a bunch of people as slaves, and now Abraham has taken what they took. And so the question is, does this belong to Abraham now? It's
Spoils of war.
Spoils
Right,
of war.
spoils of war.
Yeah, and certainly in the ancient world, there was the concept of the right of conquest, and if you took something successfully, that it was yours. And so when the kings who are allied with Abraham, they're wondering, are we getting our stuff back, or does this belong to Abraham now? And they especially wonder when Abraham offers a tenth of it as an offering to Mejia, who is the sort of priest king of this is Shalom, probably Jerusalem, and those are other fun midrashim that we won't get
Right.
into about the origin of Melchizedek, who he is, what he's doing here. But so there's this moment where, this is Genesis 14. 14:21 through 23. The king of Sodom says to Abram, give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself. So give me all my people back and you can keep the stuff. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I swear to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours. You shall not say, it is I who made Abram rich. And according to this midrash from Rabbi Yochanan, that is the moment in which Abraham does something so egregious that the punishment is hundreds of years of slavery in Egypt. And the question is, like, why? What did he do that was so bad? He gave someone his stuff back. And it would seem that the problem here is that he had a moment where he could have taken all the people of Sodom, he could have brought them into his house, into his people, into his nascent religious understanding. He could have converted them. He could have, in the language of the Talmud, brought them under the wings of Shekhinah. And he chooses not to. He chooses to play politics, to play the great game with the kings of the region, and say, sounds like for the purpose of pride almost.
Well, I would say
you're not going to be able to say that you're the one who made me rich. So here's all your stuff back, and here's all your people back. And we know what happens to those people in Sodom and Gomorrah ultimately.
Right. I see it more than pride. I see it as maybe couched in the language of religion, because he begins like, I swear by God, and here is where we get, I think, the first understanding of Abraham worshiping a universal God. I might be mistaken in the sense that Koneh Shamayim va'aretz, like God is the creator of heaven and earth.
Right.
There is not just the most powerful God, but he is the cosmic God, and I am in relationship with him. And therefore, I don't need you because I am in relationship with God. So God will take care of me. God will make me rich, and I don't need your input. I don't need the source. I don't need your money, but I also don't need your people, because I am doing my own thing. I'm now in relationship to God. And during certain times of Jewish history, and maybe we can get that later, it's that, like, it has been seen as kind of like one of the perks, or like one of the features of Judaism, is that we are not oppressive, that we are not imposing, that we are not knocking on doors, that we're not forcing people to our religion. Although we know that it happened during the Hasmoneans, and then it happened under Dunawas in Yemen in the 6th century. But through all, Jews have said, you know what, you do you, I'll do me, and I'm in my relationship with God, and pretty much I'm okay being by myself. And there is this other verses that bolster this image, as we're a people that lives alone. We're a people that is independent and kind of doing their own thing. But and I think this is where Rabbi Yochanan might be getting his inspiration. We have, on the other end of the spectrum, kind of like the more prophetic texts, the Isaiahs and the Jeremiahs and the Ezekiels and Amos and Micah. They're saying, well, eventually, once you get it right, once you get your ideas and your covenant straight, this is a covenant that is going to be appealing to the world, and then you're going to have a global responsibility. And I think what Rabbi Yochanan is saying, well, that global responsibility could have started before.
Yeah. It's one thing to say, I don't think any of us are interested in saying, we have a monopoly on truth and we're the only good path. Everyone ought to be Jewish. I don't think anyone's interested in that conversation. But it's one thing to say there's more than one good path, but it's another thing to say every path is fine. There's no such thing as a bad path. Every human society is equally fine, and I'm going to live my way over here with a sense that everyone is made in the image of God, and that every human being matters, and that we have a responsibility to be holy and to be good to each other. And you're going to live over there with everything that's happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, with the oppression, with the destruction of human goodness. The book of Ezekiel and the rabbis go into great detail about the sin of Sodom and what it is precisely. It's not what some people talk about. It is that they were cruel. They were cruel to each other, and they were especially cruel to the downtrodden. And so it's these people that we're talking about. It's the average person, the servants, the slaves of Sodom who bore the brunt of that. And Abraham is just returning them when it doesn't have to be that way. Now you could make a case, maybe it doesn't have to be like we're being a little too either or here. There's a false choice of either they're going to come under the wings of the Shekhinah, or they're going to go back to slavery in Sodom. Maybe there's a third path. I don't know.
Look, I think the third path is he's like, I don't think he even tries. That's the sense. It's like, right. I will not take any. Like, I am out. I did it. I rescued my nephew. He's the one I want. I want my people to be paid, and then I want nothing else to do to you. And that there is a silver lining to that. Like, we don't annoy people. We don't knock on doors. We don't tell them they're going to hell. That is wonderful perks of and features of Jewish, like, what would we call this? Like, I don't know. It's exceptionalism. It's like we're doing our, but that can also turn into indolence. When you see something in the world, when you see bad ideas in the world, when you see bad trends, and you have an alternative, right? You at least have to have your alternative shine out. And
Yeah.
I know that throughout a lot of Jewish history, this was simply not a possibility.
Right.
But I think this is a midrash that whose time has come. I think the Jewish people today, particularly the Jewish diaspora in North America and Europe, have a sense of strength and security that is very strange and new. Certainly, the Jewish community in Israel, it's, despite all the problems, also incredibly secure, and now we cannot afford to be indolent. And on the one hand, today in the discourse, it turns out like, oh, look at all these wonderful things that Jews make, like during COVID, like the vaccine and like the face mask that like turns blue when you sneeze, and like all of these amazing things that are being produced by Israel or produced by Jews, and all of our Nobel prizes and all of that is certainly something worth of pride. But I do think that Judaism has something more to offer than just stuff.
Yeah.
But rather like the ideas and the processes that Judaism carries may be the antidotes to some of today's problems. And if we don't, as a Jewish community, say, we see a problem where we live, and this doesn't mean, like, I think coming under the wings of Shekhinah is a very loaded term. And I know that we identify that as, yes, conversion, but it's also, it's you can say like, look, when you take this toxic understanding of, let's take an example of technology, like Shabbat, the idea of Shabbat. We know that we're in the rat race. We've been in the rat race for 200 years. Like the Industrial Revolution has changed something about the pace of life. And you have the movie with Charlie Chaplin and like we become cogs in the machine. This is an old problem. We have silent movies about it, and it hasn't gone better. And we have the antidote. We can say like, look, maybe take a day off.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe right now in the Zoom verse, let's learn from our tradition how to make our personal interactions more meaningful. How can we protect our interactions? That's just a simple example. It's by not letting our light shine, by not being public about our beliefs. We are depriving the world of tools that the world sorely needs. And I think that is why actually in the flow of the midrash, the punishment is going to Egypt. Because what is Egypt? Egypt is another lost opportunity. Joseph could have Joseph had the means and the opportunity to really transform Egypt, but he didn't have the motive.
Right.
In many ways, he's still like, well, I'm just going to be a good servant to Pharaoh. Pharaoh wants food. Pharaoh wants Egypt to be mighty and powerful. And what does he do? I find this to be one of the darkest places in the book of Genesis. Not like, yes, that Sodom and Gomorrah, of course, is a dark place, but like what Joseph does in the famine, how Joseph takes advantage of the famine to centralize power, to pretty much own all of the land, to take the land away from the Egyptians, like,
and to enslave them.
And therefore it later comes and bites you. Mm-hmm. It comes and bites you, right? Because Joseph could have said, look, we have this great opportunity. This famine is, and again, a pandemic or something like, could be like, we have this huge opportunity for reset, for realigning our values. You have experienced hunger. You have experienced fear. You know that I am in contact with something that has good ideas, right? Like, I will take you through this, but let's change the conversation. And instead, Joseph loses that opportunity. And in many ways, the Jewish experience of enslavement in Egypt is kind of like, this is what happens when Joseph didn't speak up.
Right.
Right. Yes, Pharaoh was evil, and the Egyptians that did nothing, and the Egyptians that murdered, and the Egyptians that were willing to go out and flung babies in the Nile, of course, are guilty. But like channeling Heschel, we're also responsible in the sense that we have a duty to put these ideas, to put these Jewish technologies out there, without the expectation that, oh, look, you might have started taking a day off, and leave technology off, and you see that your family is better, that doesn't mean you're going to become Jewish or you're going to become to a synagogue, but we have ideas worth sharing. Like this is
Yeah.
the original TED Talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm wondering, how do you think this translates into the work we do? And I know it's sort of a broad question, but um I think about the work I do with my conversion students, and very often, they show up, they don't necessarily know a lot, but they know some things. I mean, there's something that pushed them to my conversion program, and they're just so enthusiastic. And often they will speak to me in language of transformation and in language of discovery, that, oh, I never knew that this was available, or I never knew it was so amazing. And I find that when I talk to our colleagues about this, that's often a tendency that they try to sort of tamp down a little bit. That, it's like, oh, I'm glad this is working for you, I'm glad that you found a spiritual home, but we don't need to bash other paths. We don't need to talk about like how this is better than other things. There might be good reasons and bad reasons for that, but I'm confident in saying that Judaism is better than some other things. Maybe it's not the only path for every single human being, but it's definitely a better path than a lot of the other ones out there that are about tearing people down, about being the tiger that prowls at night. I think it's a set of spiritual technologies that lift the human soul, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to share it with anyone else who wants to hear about it. But that doesn't seem to be something that often happens in the way that makes sense to me.
Well, I think, and this is something that for the converts who are listening to us, and I don't know, I don't know who listens to us, but I do guess it's a lot of people who are either converts or considering conversion, or um, when I discovered Judaism, the way I framed it is, when I was in my previous religion, I had a toolbox. And that toolbox did some things very well. Some things even that Judaism doesn't do particularly well. But when I discovered Judaism, I said, you know what? These tools, I find this toolbox more suited to me. I like the way Judaism gets me through life. I like the way it frames reason. I like the way it makes room for, like, at least in the Judaism that I practice, for science and for inquiry and questioning and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to go with this set of toolboxes, which, at least for me, do a better work at addressing my spiritual needs. And I think all converts go through this in a hype, like, fiery, because otherwise you wouldn't do this. This is difficult and long and sometimes expensive. And I know that some people don't live close to a Jewish community, and it means relocating, or it takes incredible sacrifices. You don't do this because, like, oh, I'm not driving a Mazda, I've just got a Subaru now. But like there needs to be a moment of enthusiasm and like just be falling in love madly, irrationally, with these ideas and the transformations that they do in your life. But I also think that this needs to be tapered, not tempered. It needs to be tempered.
Tempered,
See,
yes.
English, lots of words, lots of vocabulary. It needs to be tempered with, you know what? Okay, great that you found this, great that you're in love. But one of the things that we do as Jews is we don't bash other people. We don't need to be triumphant. We don't need to go into disputations and defeat, like and that is, I think, what finally will make people fit more in the Jewish landscape.
Sure.
And this is something that we've talked a lot personally and with other colleagues. This is a process of integration, of naturalization, and on the one hand, converts usually have that enthusiasm that born Jews lack, as people who are brought up in any faith usually are kind of like lukewarm, because what it's what you're used to. It's home, and a lot of people take home for granted.
Mhm.
Partially it's because Jewish education needs to be a little better, and like a lot of Jews need to know more about Judaism to fall in love with it. Um, but when you're coming from the outside, you can like go full on enthusiastic, like discovery, like mad in love, like this is your first love. But then, in order to many ways live these values of Judaism, and I think it is, despite all of its possible toxic consequences, that this idea that Judaism is it's on a unique path, and we don't need to bash, and we don't need to fight other religions or try to disprove them. That is overall a positive thing. But we cannot do is be indolent. Right. And it's like, now I am in my community of faith, and now I can just keep this to myself.
Right.
It is
And
not
see,
about converting the world. It's not about making everybody Jewish. It's about, look, you're having a problem, or we are having a problem, and this is a Jewish solution. And I'm going to put it up there, and I'm going to try to implement it. And this is something that the Jewish community in many ways has been doing. Like all the Mount Sinai hospitals that start being like pretty much focused for a vulnerable immigrant community that might not get health access somewhere else, eventually become a blessing for everyone. Like HIAS, or all of these organizations that started serving exclusive needs of the Jewish people, eventually these values and this and the universal valence of Jewish values eventually allows it to have a global impact. And I think that's just the natural way of things. And sometimes we just don't want to let our light shine. I'm all about that.
I guess to me, like, you're right. I'm not interested in having a disputation with
Mhm.
my friend who's a Protestant minister, because like, what would be the point of that? That sounds kind of silly. Um, but I would be happy to be in dialogue with a lot of ideas that I think Judaism finds repellent and that are increasingly popular around the world. Whether it's a rise of fascist impulses, or just nihilism, or the sort of hyper capitalism that denies human dignity. I think these are things that Judaism has very strong opinions about, and I think correct opinions. And there are definitely moments where I see the world around us moving in what I think of as a bad direction, and there is a Jewish response to that. And it's not about like I'm going to go argue with the Methodists, but I do want to argue with someone that these things are worth standing up for. I think that can be the message to take from this midrash.
At a large level, but also on a micro level uh, look, I live in Oklahoma City, and as part of the Jewish clergy in Oklahoma City, we do a lot of interfaith work. And in small things, it's like, for example, we here in Oklahoma City have an incredibly racially diverse community within the Jewish community. And when we interact with churches that are far more homogenous in their makeup, they're curious. They're like, wow, you're all like, I didn't imagine Jews like there being like there's Latino kids and African American kids and Native kids and Ashkenazi European kids, like, and you all keep it together. And that is a technology that we can say like, well, these are the Torahs. These are the tools that we use to keep a multi-ethnic, multiracial community of the spirit together. And like, yes, and we have to address tyranny and violence and I don't know, like 80 years ago with nuclear threat, like just superpowers threatening to blow each other up. I think Judaism has very strong opinions that should be aired in a Jewish context.
Right.
And not necessarily, well, we'll let Israel do it, or we'll let like the official heads. Like it begins with people saying like, you know what? In my faith tradition, we see these impulses as negative, and here is the antidotes that my tradition offers.
Right.
And we can leave it at that. Like everybody has ideas, but I think we need to throw our hat in the ring of ideas. This is for too long we've been on sidelined. We have not sidelined ourselves. We've been sidelined by history, but now we are in a moment of privilege. We are Abraham in many ways triumphant. We just proved that, like the 5 and the 4 kings, like we are in a place where we can say, you know what? Let me look into that.
Right.
Because maybe Sodom isn't working, and maybe I can give you tips. Like, it doesn't mean that Sodom becomes like the first Zion, although Ezekiel certainly believes that eventually like Sodom and Zion get connected and get redeemed together. But
yeah, this is in a sense what it is to re-enter history,
right.
to re-enter the global conversation. And the story of Abraham in Genesis 14 is very much about, here's a moment where Abraham, I'm coming into history. I'm coming into global politics. And it's an interesting take. It's an interesting midrash to say, like, this is also a moment of a missed opportunity. We'll put it that way.
Right. And then once they experience either, like, we cannot let pharaohs forget Joseph. We cannot let pharaohs forget and like start killing children, and like we need to remind Pharaoh what he's doing. And that is what Moses then tries, but it's been so long that Pharaoh is too long gone, which is like how the Rambam explains Pharaoh's heart being hardened. It's not that God is actually interfering with Pharaoh's free will, but rather once you let bad ideas take over your discourse, it's very hard to undo. It's very, like, once you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and like you're like the lies that you tell yourself to keep on going down a bad path eventually becomes almost irredeemable. I think the Rambam is trying to be optimistic, saying almost, but in reality we know that, like, often when you let bad ideas take over, it's a mess. It's a huge mess. So we need that Torah input. We need that Jewish voices, because again, there's not a Jewish answer to anything, but we do need Jews throwing their hats in the ring.
Absolutely. We're gonna have to wrap it up here. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, Juan, and thank you for everyone.
Always a pleasure learning Torah with you and with all of you.
Always. And thank you for everyone who's watched and listened. And I hope you will like and subscribe and give us the thumbs up or whatever the thing is. And we want to thank Joe Buchanan for use of his song for our theme music. And
check him out.
Check him out. Yep,
good Jewish Americana.
Got a new album out, and maybe we're gonna get him on the show one of these days. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
And we will hopefully see you all next week. All right, take care. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Yasharei Malachei